Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Appreciate everybody joining us for our little Hellebore Gardening Unplugged chat today. So how many people grow Hellebores? Did most everybody try them? All right. So we'll talk a little bit about the different ones and where they've come from, where they've gone. Has anybody ever seen them in the wild? Has anybody ever visited? Okay. It's pretty cool to see them in the wild. In the wild, this is how they look. This is a wild collected Hellebore. That's about as good as they ever look in the wild. Some might have a tiny bit of purple in them, but there's nothing like what we know of as the Helleborus hybridus group. This represents about 70 years worth of breeding, but this is where everybody started from, and they would get just a tiny bit of purple and then self it and then self it and self it, and that's how we got to some of the amazing plants you see today. Let me pass that around if somebody wants to actually see what Hellebores look like. Hellebores are from primarily the Balkan region. That's really where the peak of Hellebores from Hungary, Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia. And there they grow in both woodlands, but they also grow out a lot in prairies. It's really fascinating the range of where you see Hellebores in the wild. What was really neat is to see them growing in the wild in some areas with things like epimediums. Some things we know. Actually, what was very interesting to me, they grow with blue fescue, if any of you have ever grown that. That grows in the wild. They grow with a lot of ferns and quite a few things that we grow. In terms of Hellebores, they're basically two groups. So the Hellebores with above ground stems, and we'll look at those, and there's only a few of those. And then the Hellebores with below ground stems. And the below ground stems are what we know of as rhizomes. That's the most common of the groups. Mainly what we know today in the non-stemmed ones, you have one group which comprises almost every species, which would be Croaticus, Varieties, or True Orientalis, Purpurescens, etc. Those have all been interbred to produce what we call Helleborus hybridus, which is what you'll see primarily today. The outlier of the group, sort of the white sheep of the family, is Helleborus niger. Most of the others bloom February. That one blooms November, December. And over the years, people had tried, and nobody had been able to be successful, crossing this group with the Helleborus niger, the outgroup. Now, in the last few years, that has actually changed. The cool thing about that is Helleborus niger faces out. All the other Hellebores face down. And that is to prevent, because they're in an area that snows really heavily. And having your face up in the snow is probably not a good way to get pollinated, to have seed, to live long and prosper. That's why they hang down. So as breeders, we've had to cross and cross and cross and raise them up a little bit each time to get them back now where they actually face out. So a lot of the new modern ones we find actually do look out where you don't have to raise the flowers up. So let's take a walk and we'll look at some in the garden. Is Helleborus croaticus from Croatia. Very cute little thing, small flowers, got a little bit of purple, and again, nothing like the flashy hybrids, but it's this really low dense plant. This is one of the few species Hellebores we actually offer, because I think that's pretty special. Not been used a lot in breeding, but I think this has a lot of potential. So that's what you would see in the wild if you actually found one of those in Croatia. Now this is what we know as Helleborus hybridus. You can see how far that has come from the original species. The breeders now can pretty much put any color on there. There's a few colors they haven't managed yet, but they'll be coming soon. So it really was getting all the yellow ones, you'll see some yellows a little later, came from Helleborus viridis. All the purple came from Helleborus purpurescens, because that had a little bit of purple. All of the doubles, which you see in a lot of them now, came from one population found by a friend of ours, Elizabeth Stragman. And she's an English Hellebore breeder, and she found one population in the wild that actually had double flowers, and I've been lucky enough to visit that population. She got a couple of seed from that, grew it out. Those had doubles, and every double has originated from that one find. Without that, we might not have double hellebores today. Hellebores in the garden prefer conditions like this. This is actually west-facing sun. They do not flower as well in deep shade. Light shade, they're okay, but sort of that half and half is where they really thrive. So this is what you would get on the 5th year after you plant. So it's one of those plants, they get a little better each year. Most of the Helleborus hybridus are evergreen, whereas some of the deciduous, some of the species are actually deciduous. They will completely disappear in the wintertime. So if you get those and they disappear, don't absolutely go nuts about that. Now, Hellebores reproduce from seed. Let's see if I can find one that's getting close to seeding. We may be a little early on that one. They form the seed right in the middle. So where the flowers are, where the flower parts are, is where the seed will be. Hellebores do not come true from seed. So when you plant seed of this, you're going to get what's near it that the bees have crossed, and then you're going to get its father, its grandfather, its grandmother, its great-grandmother, and you're going to go all the way back. So you're going to get generally a muddy mess. So what you can do is plant several together that are similar color. Then your offspring are going to have a much higher rate of coming close to the color that you want. But if you put a purple one by a yellow one, a purple by a white one, you got mud. And it's not going to be attractive. And so you need to have it far enough where the bees are going to be less likely to fly. What does that mean? I mean, bees can fly a long ways. We typically here, when we're isolating, we will do maybe 50 to 100 feet. It's not going to prevent bees from going to there, but it will reduce the chance of those. Okay? Now, one of the most interesting hellebores is this plant right here. This is a stemmed hellebore, and we know that because it has a stem. This is Helleborus lividus. This is the only hellebore with naturally mottled foliage, and this is a Spanish species. It's the only place this occurs. If you read the books from England, it says this is not winter hardy, because this is a hellebore that must have lots of summer heat to develop sugars to make it through the winter. It's absolutely fine here. The cool thing about lividus, number one, if it wasn't so hot today, it's not actually dry, it's just not used to the sun. The flowers are pretty much facing out, and it transmits this beautiful silver foliage to the hybrids. So there are a number of hybrids. Now, generally, anything that's a complex hybrid with this is probably going to be sterile. First generations are fertile, but anything past that, they're all sterile, and they all have this. So you've got a group now called the Ibergensis hybrids. So when you look in the nursery or look in the catalog, you'll see Helleborus X Ibergensis. That means it's a cross with this, and it's sterile, and it has cool mottled foliage. So this was a major breakthrough plant when people started using this to breed with. Okay.
Can you propagate hellebores by cuttings?
Can you propagate by cuttings? Yes, because in most hellebores, when you divide the plant, that's what you've done, is you've just taken cuttings.
Oh, okay.
Because the stem runs underground. So yes, you can do that. Now on this one, you actually can root these stems. They're not easy to do, but you can do that. So yes, it's not generally done. Most everybody uses seed, and then some people use divisions. If you're going to divide it, you do not want to divide it in spring. If you do, your hellebore will be dead. You need to divide it in fall or winter. That is the only times you want to be dividing hellebores. Early fall all the way up through the winter time when they're dormant. Okay, let's go a little further. Let's look at. So one of the really neat things that also happened is I mentioned the Hellebore group of Hybrids and then Niger. They have never been able to be crossed until a few years ago, and some breeders in Germany did that, and this is what they call Helleborus glandiferensis. That's because they were first made in the town of Glandorf. See, Latin's really not complicated once you learn the thing. These are amazing. They're completely sterile. They have the darkest foliage of any, almost a black green, and the flowers face out. And these are called the Ice and Roses series. So you'll see Ice and Roses red, Ice and Roses pink, Ice and Roses white, and then now they've got a bunch more. So that was really a major breakthrough on the Hellebores. And more of the just classic hybrids that we see. So if you don't want Hellebores to breed in your garden and reseed, once they go in and say a month after they finish flowering, just cut the flower stems off, throw them away, no seeding. Because Hellebores can get, particularly after several years of being allowed to seed, they can take over a fairly large area of your garden. And they're not particularly easy to dig out. They have very intense contractile roots that hold them in. I mean, you really need to get a big grubbing hoe or a serious shovel to get them out. So a little bit of seeding is fine in the right area. If you live near a nature park or natural area, stay away from the fertile ones because they will actually reseed into those areas, and we certainly don't need that. You can see some of the older hybrids, they still have the flowers facing down, whereas anything that's newer, we're selecting for more out-facing flowers. Again, we don't want the flowers really up, because if we had a real winter, like maybe tomorrow, that would not be good. The flowers then tend not to go to seed. But you can see the different array of colors as we walk through. So here I mentioned the yellows. This was really an amazing breakthrough to be able to have good rich yellows and not just single yellows, but double yellows. So most of when you buy Hellebores, especially Hellebores hybrids, a lot of those are sold as seed strains. So when you see names like Rose Quartz, Painted Ladies, Wedding Dance, those are all hand crossed every single year because those are generally sold without flowers. You want to be sure those have a 95% plus rate of being what you actually say they are. So breeders keep big stock plants, and every year they go in and make tens of thousands of hand crosses. And that's where those come from. Those are not something that just happens. Those are not something that somebody goes out and just gathers seed out of the garden. And that's why those are more expensive. Many times the seed for those will cost anywhere from $3 to $5 per seed. So there's a lot of work to make it look like there was no work that went into it. So we looked at Helleborus lividus earlier with the nice speckled leaves. This is one of those hybrids. This is the Ibergensis, made in Iberg. And you can see how nice that beautiful foliage is with the pattern of silver on it. There's actually leaves on one right there that are a little further along. The foliage is incredible. I'd grow this one if it never flowered. Also, because it has Helleborus niger, all the flowers face out and there's no seed. So to me, yeah.
This one doesn't seed.
This one doesn't cross with anything else.
You put that with like some of the purple ones.
Yep, yep.
You wouldn't get the mud.
No, no. This will never produce anything. This is a mule.
So the plant will just keep getting bigger, but it's not putting out babies.
It will not be putting out babies. You'll have one plant forever. So these would have been put in 2019. So this is now year 4 for these, and they just get better and more flowers each year. And because they don't produce seed, they just continue to produce flowers for a much longer period. So Helleborus typically, you know, again, I mentioned Niger, that can start as early as November, but that's generally in November, December, whereas the hybridus are generally late February, but these that have some hybridus in them and Niger start blooming generally late January, early February. So you can really expand the seasons with many of these different series of Hellebores. Okay. And again, you can just see how far these have come from that original double. It's just really extraordinary to see the diversity. See if I can pick a few and we'll just... You can just see some of the incredible diversity that the breeders have been able to get to. The colors, just every year, they just get better and better. So I tell people, if you've got 10-year-old, 15-year-old Hellebores, there's no way they can hold a candle to these. The advances every 5 to 10 years is just quite remarkable. I can go through populations that I saw back in the 70s, and I thought back then these are great, and I look at them now and there's not a thing in there I'd keep. The advance is just so amazing. And again, you can just see the, see if I can pick one here. The range of colors and the patterns are just absolutely stunning. Why don't y'all pass these flowers around?
Now are these are the
these are all seed ones. These are all hybridus. So yeah, these are all the ones
you
that
have to plant them with similar colors.
Yes. Now normally I said that the hybridus are sold without flowering them. They're sold by the strain name. We actually do a lot of our own where we isolate them in the garden and we actually hold them for a second year. So we have 2-year-olds, so we can actually flower them and sell them in flower. So up in our greenhouse 7, that's some of our 2-year-olds that are actually in bloom. So you can see exactly what you're getting as opposed to buying a name and hoping there's a 95% chance it's exactly right. The yellows are getting better every year. We've got some really amazing, not just pure yellows, but yellows now with some real nice spotting. Let's see if I can, yeah, that's not one of the better ones. We've got much better than that now. So every year we go in and we evaluate and we will dig out a lot of these clumps and replace them with something better. So every year we're upgrading our strains. So there's no Hellebores that have been here more than probably 7, 8 years because they're just not up to the new standards. So here's some more of the glandiferensis I showed you in the back. I showed you the red one. This is the white one. And because it's got the niger in there, it was blooming in January. So it's almost finished now, where many of the hybridus are just getting started. So this is niger crossed with hybridus. So this is almost over with now. You get many 80-degree days, they go pretty quick. This was just incredible last week. This was Ice and Roses Red. Just look at the number of flowers on that. And this is, again, one of those sterile hybrids. I've got some photos last week, and it was beyond compare. Now, I mentioned the Helleborus lividus, the one from Spain. Now that's actually been used to breed this. And this was crossed with another stemmed Helleborus called Helleborus argutifolius. from Corsica. And so that created a plant called Hellebores sternii, which has the nice mottled foliage, but it's up on a stem. Not the most hardy of things. If it goes below 10 degrees, it will die to the ground. But this has been used to now cross with Niger to get some really nice silver veined foliage of Hellebores. You see things called Helleborus ericksmithii and Helleborus bullardii. And that has either argutifolius or lividus in the background of those. Any questions? I know we've talked a lot about Hellebores. Anything we have? They like generally dry soils. The one thing they don't like is wet soils. They'll take clay, they'll take sand. They do not like wet. Any questions? Acidic, alkaline, they're native generally in sort of a neutral pH. A lot of books say they need extra lime. I don't find they do. They don't dislike it, but generally it's right at that neutral to slightly alkaline. There are really some amazing species. If you walk over into the far area, way far on the sunny side, up in the little picnic area, you'll see one called Helleborus multifidus. That has the narrowest leaves of any. The leaves are that thin. It's like almost pencil lead, and those are fascinating. I don't care if they flower, because the flowers are just nothing. But the foliage, when you see them in the wild, you don't even recognize them as a hellebore. And those are from Herzegovina, is where the really neat ones are. So we had to do some traveling into some pretty remote areas to find those. But man, when you do, it's pretty extraordinary. Now the breeders thought, well, I can cross that and get good flowers and keep that narrow foliage. Well, that doesn't work. You've either got good flowers or narrow foliage. The two I just don't know that we'll ever see those two together. The genes are so hard to get to sort out at that point. Yes?
Which ones did you say were sterile?
Okay, any of the Helleborus abergensis, glandiferensis, ericksmithii, nigercours, or bullardii.
Fair amount. Okay.
Basically anything but hybridus. Hybridus are the fertile ones.
Gotcha.
Almost everything else is going to be sterile,
Gotcha.
except some of the species. But other questions? Nope. Fertilizers. Okay, everything in our garden we use all organic. I don't ever recommend a chemical fertilizer on anything, because the whole idea is we have to get away from the idea that we're fertilizing plants. You never, ever, ever fertilize a plant in the ground. You feed the microbes. The microbes feed the plants. All you care about are the microbes in the soil. Those are the things you can't see. Those are the things that there are millions in every teaspoon that make the soil work. You keep them happy, they'll keep the plants happy. You kill them by putting out fast-release fertilizers, then the plants aren't happy. So any good organic fertilizer, fantastic. Compost, great thing. Others? Yes.
Somebody told me with planting them,
Yes.
not to plant the dirt right up to the bottom. They don't like the dirt to be high up on theirs. Is there any special?
No, you plant them just like you do anything else. Yeah, no, you don't want them up above the ground. You want them right even with the ground. Yeah, just plant them the same way you would do everything else, except a tomato. Tomatoes you can plant deep, they're fine. A few things you can plant high, but not these. Just plant them like you do anything regularly. They need no special care. They're really quite easy in the garden. Yeah, yes?
We have some on the side of our house, and some of the leaves have, I think it's from the cold weather, they turn brown.
Great question. Glad you asked that. So a lot of people ask, when should I cut my hellebores back? For appearance sake of the flowers, we wait until the flower gets color and it rises above the foliage. The reason we do that is those leaves, old leaves, even though they get ugly and burned in the wintertime, keep the soil cool and they slow the hellebore down. This year, if we get a really bad cold, it's going to be a problem on a lot of plants. So the longer we can slow those hellebores down by leaving the old foliage, great. But we go in, the minute that flower is above the foliage, you're not going to slow it down anymore. We go in and we cut all the old foliage off. It's not required for the health of the plant, but it sure makes the flowers look a whole lot nicer. And why are we growing them if it's not for the flowers? So generally for us, that's going to be 1st of February. Now, I don't like to cut them back in the fall. Some people love to clean them up in the fall. That's no good, because then again, you get some light in there and those things start popping way too early. So great question. But yeah, the black you see, that's just winter damage. Just things falling on them, it's sticks falling on them from the trees. It's all kinds of stuff they can get damaged. Some get damaged more than others, but doesn't bother the plant. Now, what you do not want to do is do not ever cut the foliage off during growing season. So spring, summer, you cut the foliage off, you just killed your plant. It's evergreen for a reason. It is required to have foliage all year. So the only way we get by with it, it's only got 4 weeks before it shoots out new foliage in spring. So hellebores are growers in wintertime. They grow in cool seasons. They are completely dormant in the summer. They'll still be green, but they are dormant. They are not growing. Great question. Yes?
At the last place we lived, we had them.
Mm-hmm.
When the stem turned brown and
Yeah.
the leaves turned brown, this is what I was told, and you can go like this and pull it right out. Go ahead, you can't hurt the plant. And they did great with that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any problem with it. They pull out so simple.
Yeah,
That makes sense. I mean, is that?
Yeah, you shouldn't have anything ever pulling out. If you do, that sounds like it's probably voles. But if your hellebores dig, that's when I grab a hellebore and something pulls out, that means I got a vole problem. So that's generally not a good thing. You should not have anything ever really pull out. Now, if you don't cut the old flower stalks off and leave them there long enough, eventually, a year later, yes, you can pop them right off. But again, we don't let them seed in the garden because for us, it's about colors and textures. We have everything in the place that we want it. And if we let them seed, we'd have purples and reds and yellows, and it would just not be visually what we want to accomplish. But everybody's garden's different. Some people love to have that rainbow of colors. That's great. There's not a right or a wrong with plants. And
What makes them deer resistant?
what makes them deer resistant? They're fairly toxic to deers. So deer generally don't browse hellebores, which is great.
Is it the smell or what?
No, it's chemicals inside that. I couldn't tell you which chemicals. I'm not a chemist, but well, where's our chemist? What chemical is it in hellebores they don't like? Is it helleborine?
You know, if I had made that up, I bet you would all believe it.
So, there's something in there that they don't like. That's the beauty of hellebores, and yeah, that's why a lot of people grow them. Is the deer don't browse them. I mean, I'm not saying they'll never come in and take one nibble, but generally one nibble, and they're like, now let's find greener pastures. Yeah, find the hosta. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I hope you'll please go walk through the gardens. There's a lot of hellebores all the way around. Really a tremendous amount to see, and hope that gets you a little more excited about the genus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.